All righty. All right. Good afternoon, gentlemen. We are the Texas Business of Sports Student Organization. Today, we're presenting our defeating the too high data-driven offensive adaptations in the modern NFL. So, as we know, the NFL has shifted into an era where defenses are saying we're not going to let you beat us over the top, and their main tool is the too high safety structure. Cover two, cover four, split field variations, keep both safeties deep. The point of this structure is to reduce explosives and force offensive to execute long, mistake-free drives. And the trade-off is that these deep safeties, they can also be extra run defenders, and so they can't erase intermediate window at once. So our work has two goals. First, quantify when and why the too high shows up and which teams execute it well. And then the second goal is to identify the specific formations, personnel groupings, and route concepts that can reliably punish the too high without tipping our hands so badly that the defenses can check out of it.
So yeah, I'll go ahead and this is our team. So only two of us here today, since the rest of them couldn't identify what Eastern time zone is properly. So I'm Varun, and this is Doug. I'm a junior stats and data science major at the University of Texas at Austin.
And I'm a junior math and finance major at the McCombs School of Business and College of Natural Science.
So here's our agenda. Primarily, first off, looking at the too high deployment analysis, and then we're going to looking at league trends and success, then going to offensive scheme identification, formation, and personnel strategies, play types and route concepts, making them specific towards the looking at the Minnesota Vikings defense, and the team that we chose to look at offensively was the Kansas City Chiefs. Kind of look at the team that got hindered initially the most by the too high looks to stop those deep shots to Tyreek Hill back in the day. Look at our play design and tactical execution, some key insights and takeaways.
So, what makes a defense choose a too high in the first place? Big pattern that we recognize is spacing. When offenses present more receiving threats, defenses tend to respond with more too high because they need help over the top on both sides. In your spread looks, trips, quads, and balances, there are more vertical releases than horizontal stress. And this defense is essentially protecting itself from, the one play touchdown that can flip a game over its head. Now, the football trade-off is too high usually means you're playing with fewer bodies in the box. If you're a nickel with two safeties deep, you're often six in the box versus seven. And that matters because if you change the run fit, that changes the run fit math and it changes how linebackers can expand underneath the crossers. So the takeaway from this slide is that your formation can force the defense into the shell that you want. If you want to keep them in too high, you can exploit their weaknesses. You need formations that preserve, credible pass threats without like giving away that you're going to run and making them spin in a single high.
Now we move on to looking at how teams did this year against or using too high looks. So you can see that the Houston Texans, not trying to pander to any judges here, but Swarm did a great job this year with too high looks, having the lowest EPA allowed this year. Other teams that did well were the Jaguars, Bills, and Rams. Um, you can see that the case study that we're going to look at later with the Vikings were also one of the top 10 defenses in regards to playing the too high looks. Teams that weren't doing as well were Cincinnati, Dallas, and Tampa Bay, allowing a lot of high positive EPA and too high situations. And that kind of brings the question like, what separates good too high teams from bad if they're all playing similar types of defenses? So one, safeties who are disciplined and don't get manipulated by the QB's eyes is a huge important thing. And then two, the underneath defenders who can match routes and guard like seams and crossers without busting is a huge thing. And then three, a pass rush that can get to the QB quickly since too high gets weaker the longer the play lasts. And for our matchup, Minnesota is pretty relevant because they're not just a sit back and play soft too high team. They're pretty aggressive in how they disguise their defense and how they generate pressure. So we're not just designing like a play to beat cover two. We're designing to beat too high structure while surviving like Flores's aggressive defensive style.
Right. Now, pivoting on the offense, this section really talks about like what does a good too high offense look like? So across the NFL, two high has grown. The successful offenses have moved away from living on deep isolation shots and focusing more on the intermediate efficiency, creating like anywhere from 8 to 20 yard completions that help the offense stay on schedule. So what matters schematically is how you create conflict in the middle of the field. Too high wants to take away posts, go balls, and deep overs, but it can't erase everything. So the stress points are the seams between the safeties and the intermediate windows behind the linebackers. And this is where we think the Kansas City Chiefs are a great choice. Even in years when they weren't creating a pure explosive team, they can still manufacture space with motion, alignment variation, and route layering. But here's the critical part. They have to be disciplined in how they approach this. Against a two high, if you get impatient and hunt explosives, you'll throw in a help. Your philosophy has to be take the profit and then hit the shot whenever the shell finally breaks.
Now we start looking at more formation and personnel strategies. So, looking at this, you can see that what's it called? The offensive alignments that seem to have the highest EPA are in twin and balanced formations. And that's important because in terms of the football sense, balanced sets force the defense to play honest. Both the safeties have to respect threats on both sides and not just one side. If you have bunch formations, and that reduces the defense's ability to lean coverage towards your best players. And as we get to in the future in the presentation, for the Chiefs specifically, that's important because their core matchup weapon the past couple of years has been Kelsey, and defenses love to bracket him. And balanced formations make it harder to always bracket a player without giving up space somewhere else. Personnel wise, still a disguise friendly package with most of them in regards to the Chiefs. I think 11 personnel would probably be what they would use the most, which we'd get into later in the presentation. And yeah.
Yeah, so the next layer is not just, spamming twins or spamming balance. It's about really how you use it. So when we look at the Chiefs and Andy Reid and Nagy's offense, it's built on pre-snap formations, it's built on motions, it's built on shifts and alignment changes. And so these will force the defense to declare their coverage rules. If Minnesota is truly in too high motion, then or in too high, the motion can help reveal whether they're in like a zone match or if a defender is going to carry vertically or if the safeties are going to rotate late. We also have to be honest about how Kansas City approaches its offense and how it deals with its flaws in the too high era. In recent seasons, especially last season, the defenses have been a lot more comfortable with how in staying in split safety against them because we know that they can't always become an extended handoff team. So short throws, long drives, and any negative play becomes effectively a drive killer for them. And so our formation plan we're building is to essentially solve that using the twin and balance structures to help create like a defined intermediate throws early in the down. So our quarterback isn't forced into throwing like heroic balls forever, So I think what in this project we have built how you beat a too high defense is by being efficient and being unpredictable.
So now we go into the play types and route concepts that work best. What you can see here is that the vertical routes and crossers have pretty high EPA against these too high looks. So why is that? Those vertical routes and posts, they stretch the safeties vertically so that they can't squat on intermediate routes. And that causes it to put the linebackers into conflicts, especially versus the crosses and overs. Um, and basically, we're looking for concepts like seams, deeps, overs, and posts paired with crossers because that's going to be the best way to kind of create the safeties and linebackers into conflict and either make the safety. So you're going to have to make the safeties choose and then try and make the linebackers pick the wrong spots and basically just attack whatever areas are open.
Yeah, so effectively we're trying to exploit the too high coverage's weaknesses with, specific designs. But we also have to realize that the best solution helps us disguise and doesn't really force the defense to check what we're doing immediately. So that's why we're living in 11 personnel with balanced alignments and route concepts that look pretty similar to pre-snap but hit different post-snap. I think this matters specifically against Minnesota because Flores is always like hunting what you're trying to tell him. So if you tip your play, he's going to pressure you into the wrong throw. And so our approach is to make multiple plays that look the same initially with their motion and similar splits, but also attack different windows based on the defensive reaction.
All right, and there we go. Yeah, and so this slide is basically showing how those routes are per coverage type. So as you can see, the the post route has the highest EPA against mean EPA against cover two compared to cover two and man cover four and man cover two. Um, and you see that vertical routes also have similar sort of mean EPA compared to cover four, or looking at cover two versus cover four and man cover two. And that kind of goes along with exactly what we've been saying so far in regards to the best solution is to keep the defense honest and kind of use those vertical and post routes to make the safeties choose to kind of open up more routes underneath. And that especially matters in regards to Minnesota's defense because Brian Flores is going to be trying to hunt the tells, and if you tip your play, it's going to pressure you into the wrong throw. And so it's important to kind of make the plays look pretty similar initially. Look to see if you can attack those post and vertical routes, and if not, those crossers should hopefully be open underneath, and then move through your progressions and try to find the open guy.
Yeah, so continuing on with the route concept, when you're coaching this, you're not really coaching like run across, or you're coaching spacing and you're coaching landmarks against two high cross routes to get behind the linebackers, but not drift so deep that it runs like into the safety's help. So the seam has to threaten the safety's leverage and hold him. So the outside vertical has to be like a real threat so the safety isn't cheating. And I think whenever you look at where the receivers' roles come into play. You want speed threats, so Worthy and how Tyreek used to be running routes that pull safeties, and you want Rice types working on like the working in the intermediate space for YIC. You want Kelsey as the primary manipulator because safeties are going to react to him more. And so we're not trying to throw these bombs into the too high. We're really trying to stretch the shell until it breaks and then take the highest leverage window.
You can look at route combination effectiveness right here as well, kind of saying similar things in terms of which route combinations are the most effective. Obviously, the sample sizes here aren't too large, so I don't think there's anything you can take too much out of this other than the fact that those crossers and vertical routes seem to be having a high mean EPA.
Right. And so this slide also effectively reinforces the idea that two high defenses are pretty vulnerable whenever plays extend. If QB can if the QB can extend these routes and keep structure in the two high zones and turn it into stress, defenders have to plaster longer. But I think the coaching point here is that you can't really rely on this as the only plan. You know, I think when you're talking about Minnesota, they want you to kind of drift and make a late mistake in a deep help. So the first phase of the play has to be incredibly efficient and incredibly on time, and the scramble phase is more of the bonus. And I think that this is why we want to have a defined first and second read that should be available versus the too high. Because if Minnesota pressures or rotates late, then Mahomes still has a pretty good outlet. And so our philosophy here is really if you're going to win on schedule, then you get extra. Then we have to punish them.
Now we get some key insights and takeaways of just EPA by formation overall. So the top left, you see that the spread and balanced, it's kind of just repetitive in terms of what we've been saying the whole time. Spread and balanced are pretty strong overall. And if you look at pass EPA specifically by formation, balanced and spread once again are the highest two. And then once you get to run EPA by formation, it's a little more compact in terms of like a lot of different formations have solid EPA per play. And when it comes to too high coverage percentage versus overall EPA, um, I think those balanced looks specifically get a lot of too high coverage because it's a lot more variance in terms of what routes or what types of plays you can run with that. So, and in totality, in order to beat too high, you're not going to be able to just like spam passes. You have to use these formations to force the defense to declare space, create favorable run looks. To where you're keeping the defense honest and they're gonna have to like use the linebackers to stack the box to watch out for the run and then start hitting those intermediate throws whenever defenders start trying to cheat.
Yeah, so translating this into the matchup of the Minnesota defense versus Kansas City offense, we have to understand that Minnesota under Flores is incredibly aggressive. So it matters because if you have two high offenses that are really passive, sorry, Minnesota is not a passive offense. They want to confuse protections, they want to force their hot throws, and they really want to rally the tackle. So the Chiefs' plan can't just be throw underneath because it's too predictable. Minnesota's going to drive on routes, they're going to jump crossers and pressure you into bad decisions if you do that. So we're building an approach that changes the picture for the defense while still keeping our identity, formation variety, motion, and intermediate emphasis. And then also, of course, like a run game that punishes light boxes.
So now we look at Minnesota's defensive personnel. You see that they play a lot of base 3-4 nickel, so three defensive linemen, four linebackers, and four defensive backs showing up the most. And base 4-3 nickel is after that, but that's like about half of how much they play base 3-4 nickel. Um, you can also see their defensive personnel on 1st and 10 with too high. And once again, they play base 3-4 nickel about 46% of the time. So why does that matter? Because that means that your offensive plan needs to be targeting the stretch points of that structure. So you got second level linebackers who have to cover the intermediate windows, but you still have those two safety deep protecting the top. So money is in those intermediate zones, and the linebackers have to defend those areas while the safeties stay deep, which is kind of why I wanted to pick this Chiefs first off, because I feel like just having a threat like Travis Kelce, I'm a Broncos fan, but he's killed us a lot. And I feel like where he becomes a centerpiece and running those route combinations like crossers and seams and intermediate sit routes are like the key to beating the structure.
So this is where our recommendations come in. I think we want to emphasize formations that our data says that are the best versus two eye. So in this case, we talked about twin and balance. And we also want to make sure that Travis Kelce is the primary intermediate target because the two eyes concedes those intermediate windows like we talked about. But we also want to use our wide receivers intelligently. The role of a receiver like Worthy is not get a targets on go routes. It's force the safety to honor the vertical so Rasheed and Kelce can win underneath. And because Minnesota's too high makes these boxes lighter, we want Pacheco early too. Not like 30 carries, but no, just enough to like efficient runs to force Minnesota to adjust. And so once they start spinning a safety down or fitting harder, then the intermediate passes window become a little cleaner. We can look at those options. And so the plan is to have our structure first, our formations in motion to hold the shell, and then attack the seams and the intermediate windows, and then take the shot whenever the shell finally cheats.
So now we look at what formations work against attacking Minnesota's 3-4 nickel defense. So formations that work are slot right, single left, and slot left, slot right, and single left. Er, Sorry, slot left, single left, and slot right. Formations to avoid are twin left, balanced, and twin right. Um, I want to be careful. Like that doesn't mean never call twin left. It just means that against this particular defensive structure, with our sample size, it produced worse outcomes. And personnel effectiveness wise, one running back playing an 11 personnel is clearly a positive with about zero point 0.1 offensive EPA, while playing in 12 personnel is negative in this situation. Um, so in terms of run versus the pass, the run is slightly positive and the pass is slightly negative. I think that's could be attributed to just having lesser run plays in our sample size versus too high look compared to the passing situations. So, but in terms of the final takeaway from that, their too high base 3-4 nickel defense is inviting you to kind of stay patient. So they need to take the free yards whenever they can, run into lighter boxes, throw intermediate, and avoid the kind of pass plays that create negative plays.
Yeah, so our penultimate slide over here really reinforces this concept that Bruno was talking about balance. The 2 high wants to make you impatient, makes you want to abandon the run, makes you want to force the ball deep. So the coaching emphasis becomes taking the math. The box is light, run it. The linebackers widen, hit the seam, the safety squeeze, hit the crosser, take the vertical. This also protects Kansas City from its own weakness. If the wide receiver group is inconsistent, then you don't want to live on the low percentage outside throws. You want to live on the intermediate concepts that are structurally available. And then this is where the coaching philosophy and sequencing matters. Early runs and quick games set the defense, and then intermediate layers, and then take the shot whenever you feel like you've earned it.
So now we look at our final takeaways and then talk about our potential play design. So first off, emphasize those twin and balance formations because Kansas City has shown strong results against too high, and the goal should be to create clean spacing and clear matchups between them without becoming predictable. Feature Kelsey as the main intermediate target and since too high is designed to stop deep shots, so those middle range throws should be where you keep those drives alive. Use Worthy and Rice to essentially stretch safeties and create those passes to Kelsey and other targets underneath. And then try to establish Pacheco early or whoever the running back might be next year to uh, to keep the defense honest, keep the run threat like visible on early downs. Because if they run efficiently, then Minnesota's going to have to adjust. And then let Mahomes attack that middle range and extend plays when needed. The goal is to win with structure first, not just scramble, but that ability to scramble does help them. And then in regards to our end play design, I would say 11 personnel, balanced play action, and have a seam with a shallow outlet. So obviously, you got Pacheco or Hunt in the backfield. Kelsey have him attached or slightly flexed, so he's got a clear release. Have Worthy outside as a clear vertical route. Rice is an intermediate breaker, probably running something like a dagger, and then have Hollywood Brown in the slot running a short shallow route is like a safe check down. And in terms of Mahomes' progression on this, I would say first read would be the deep shot to Worthy if he's available. And usually that's covered, but the goal is to make sure the safeties are deep. And that's once he goes through that, look to your intermediate reads, either Rice on the dagger route or Kelsey settling in that middle range, depending on how the linebackers react. And if the middle's taken up, then you take the easy shallow route to Hollywood Brown and keeps us on schedule and turn instead of taking a sack, trying to look for one of those deep or intermediate routes to open. And if everyone is covered, then use Mahomes' dual threat ability and take a easy 2 or 3 yard scramble gain. Um, and yeah, too high at the end of the day, it's built to stop explosives. So you got to beat it by staying efficient and owning those intermediate windows with Kelsey and Rice and letting Pacheco punish light boxes whenever possible and use Mahomes' scrambling ability whenever it suits. Thank you.
Judges, you guys have about a minute and 45 seconds to ask questions before we go on break, so I'll give you guys the time to do so.
Sounds good. I'll be real quick. Just a couple comments. I thought you guys did really good. One of the charts that I probably liked the best out of all those was you were looking at the EPA per play where it was you did formation plus personnel. I thought that was pretty unique. And then second comment, just for future reference, you guys were saying base 3-4 nickel and base 4-3 nickel. The 3-4 and 4-3 are both just base for just future reference. And if you guys go through any interview processes, and a nickel is anything 5 dBs or more, just for reference in the future. And then those are my comments. But great work, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, I thought it was a good job. You guys broke it down in a lot of different areas, and obviously you guys are very familiar with football, so it was a good job of um, being grounded in sort of the reality of the whole thing. So nice work.
Thank you.
Yep, just gonna echo what they said. Good job there. And then yeah, I was gonna mention what Jeremy said, just like nickel just being five, but that's just like a little tidbit. But overall, good job, guys. Definitely a lot of football knowledge here, so appreciate it.
Thank you so much, guys. I would really appreciate your insight and kind of like helping us through this journey. And we really appreciate you guys' time.
Would like to echo what Doug said. I mean, yeah, I know you guys probably have a lot of busy work coming up with the combine and draft planning. So thank you for taking time out of your day for to guide us and give us some feedback on what we can do to improve.
Thanks, guys. Nice job.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.